thank you. I am Laurie Florhaug, and I am so honored to be up on this conversation with these individuals. And I just want to first introduce them briefly, and then they're going to introduce themselves. So first we have Karina Hogan. Thank you. I met you yesterday just very briefly, so I'm really excited to hear what you have to say today. And then we have Rona Scherer, who's been behind the scenes doing a lot of work for us, and I'm very happy that you're here, Rona. And then we have Lynette Anderson, who I just met briefly today. So with that, let's go ahead and start then with, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of how you came to this space, the organization that you work with, and things of that nature.
Okay, all right. So I wear a couple of hats. So yeah, as mentioned, Karina Hogan, and just before I start, just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of where we are standing. I know Gudja Carey came in yesterday to give her acknowledgement. So acknowledgement to her, one of the elders who raised me up here in this local area. And how I got here in this space and where do I work. The number of reasons why I suppose I'm sitting here. I am part of a big Aboriginal South Sea Islander family, and I'm a single mum to two, but mum to many others. And I grew up just about 10 minutes that way in Woodridge with a big family and a big community. And from a very early age, I suppose you could say I was exposed to a lot of violence. I was raised by three very strong black women, one woman named Quilla Williams, who is from Cherbourg, Waka Waka woman, my mother, Aboriginal and South Sea Islander woman, and a Maori woman named Julian Adams. All three survivors of violence, but the most strong, resilient, amazing, incredible. There are actually no words for me to be able to explain the breadth of their amazingness. So was raised by them and my dad, who's passed now. But being exposed to that growing up, I knew that there was, it just wasn't, I felt like I was in the twilight zone. I loved my community, but I was like, this is happening as well, that's not, and yeah, so I won't go on too much, but that was my experience. So growing up, I was in a violent relationship with my children's father for about 13 years. He's in prison at the moment. And so my lived experience brought me here, but also throughout that journey, I made a decision to become a journalist early on, to be able to create a platform for black fellas to be able to speak, but also women, people of marginalised backgrounds as well. And so I've been doing that for about 12 years. And then I also sit on the board of the Children's Hospital Queensland and AIGS Brisbane, which is an Aboriginal medical service. And I advocate in those spaces, and also Black Dance, I should not forget that, but advocating for the advancement of mob in every possible way that we can. So I'm really honoured to be here today, and I really enjoyed your chat yesterday. Sorry.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. And so let's turn to Rona.
Thank you, Laurie.
Yep.
So I'm Rona Scherer. I'm a Mamu Guku Yalanji woman from Far North Queensland, and I work along with Workup. I've been having cultural conversations for probably 15 to 20 years in a professional sense, and it's been wonderful to work along with Workup Queensland now, with bringing the work that we do with the sector. And I've been there with probably a year and a bit now, so it's been wonderful to meet all the people within the sector, and up here with Auntie Lynn and Karina and Laurie, and so looking forward to hearing more.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to pay my respects, our collective respects to the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, the Yagara people, and acknowledge the deadly women that are sitting up here with me today as well. I'm a Gungaloo Widjara woman through my mother's side, and given rise to my dad. I'm from Rockhampton. I live in Rockhampton. Born and raised in that deadly town. And I think I'll probably stay there for the rest of my life, even though my grandchildren live down north of Brisbane. So, you know, I don't know how it is for other people, but moving away from, you know, the land that you're connected with is very difficult. And it's not surprising that so many Murrays in my area haven't really ventured outside of central Queensland. It's, you know, this whole thing about having that itchy foot and travelling and, you know, touring around Australia and overseas, not that long up that way. They're very firmly grounded and rooted in, you know, our homeland, our traditions and our culture. I am the CEO of Heal Yamba. So Heal is a Torres Strait Islander Creole word for healing, and Yamba is a sorry, I got a frog in my throat. So. And Yamba is a common Māori word, meaning home or place. So the organisation that I set up is called Heal Yamba, Healing Place. And I love the work that I do. I've been there for 17 years, which is a little bit embarrassing. I mean, I should have, you know, hung up the spurs, you know, a few years back. But it's just an exciting and evolving field, you know. We have really moved on from, you know, talking about domestic and family violence. We're, you know, working to change the narrative to healing. And it's really evident when we look at our community and we talk about domestic and family violence and the shame that goes with that. And shame, in our ways, is a form of punishment. You all may remember, you know, the mob turning their back. What's that? Prime Minister.
Right.
No, not Ruddy, the one before him.
Tony Abbott.
Abbott. Yes,
Oh,
Canberra.
I'm so glad she forgot his name.
You know, and that was that symbolism around shame. We are very mindful, you know, that we don't use pieces that, you know, create that trauma around shame. But anyhow, I'm blabbering on. So if you want to know more about my organisation, I've got plenty of cards, but we're quite unique and quite a boutique type of organisation in the way in which we work with our mob to support and to heal from the intergenerational trauma that's come about because of the impacts of colonisation. So to me, it's for now.
And I'm Laurie Florhaug, and I am very honored and understand the privilege to be on this land and recognize and honor all of the elders that have come before us. I am a Turtle Mountain Band of Ojibwe member from North Dakota, which is a very small, very impoverished Native American reservation that is close to the Canadian border. And through colonization, my family was removed from that reservation and moved to northern Minnesota. I worked as I went to law school, and what led me to go to law school was growing up in a family of extreme domestic and sexual violence. My father was imprisoned, uncles imprisoned, brother imprisoned, family members who have committed suicide, and all the things that come with colonization, family members murdered, you know, all that comes through that colonization. And I began working as a prosecutor primarily in the area of domestic and sexual violence in my new community. And then I began working as a tribal judge primarily in the child protection sector for a turtle, not the Turtle Mountain Band where I'm from, but from the Leech Lake tribe, which is also an Anishinaabe or Ojibwe tribe, part of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe, which is kind of an agreement between the 7 Chippewa tribes in the state of Minnesota. And then also worked as a private attorney representing women and children requesting protective orders, divorces, things of that nature. And then now primarily, so I've done a lot of different hats, but right now I'm working as a defense attorney. So with that, I thank you for those introductions and learning a little bit more about each of you. And I just want to start this conversation, and I want it to be a real free-flowing conversation. And the topic is safety, solidarity, and sacredness. And so I want, in thinking about those words, what meaning do they have for you, and how do they inform the ways that you work? And so, thinking about safety, perhaps, let's start with that word. Do you have any thoughts as to safety and how it informs your work?
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of thoughts about safety. I just live off this street here. And when I think of safety, I immediately think of my home. Was fortunate enough to purchase a home in 2015, and it's been an incredible struggle to keep that house through the loss of my dad, and then also was caring for him, and then leaving my children's father. So I have always been in pursuit of safety for my children, for my nieces who have been in care with us for almost 22 years. And so it's an interesting one, right? So I'm in an interesting situation, I suppose, because my brother, who has 5 children, I've experienced a lot of violence throughout my life, right? So understanding what the word safety means has been a really difficult one for me. And, I have people that I remember in my life who I would think, oh, I love him, he's amazing. But then every Friday night I remember also he'd get real charged up and then flog into my auntie, or my mum would be hit by this person, but I love him. So there's this confusion around where I haven't been able to find a safe place. And so I've tried to find that in my children's father, and now I understand, or I'm understanding that where that comes from. And as I continue to try and work with that in my own head, I change how it is that I alter how it is that as a household we present. I live with me and my 2 children and my niece and my cousin, and my other cousin comes and goes as well. So we're all women, and we have 3 things that we try and keep close to us, and that's love, security, and boundaries. And we say those things because each of us have experienced domestic violence, including my children. And each of us have experienced the remnants of that violence and are experiencing that alongside each other. So that solidarity thing for us, and when we talk about how does that inform my work, that comes innately from the bond that I have with those women and the other women in my family. Now, the issue, the difficulty with that safety thing is that, and the boundaries thing is understanding how to place that. So my 5 nieces are in care with us, and they have been for so many years. And my brother, who is their father, is in and out of jail, and last night happened to get arrested. And so while he knows in my house we don't have violence and we don't have drugs and we don't have these things, he knows that he can come by when he needs a shower, when he needs love, when he needs a feed, and when he needs to be with me. I can choose to cut him out of my life. I don't, and I don't make apologies for that. He has been violent towards me. He has been violent towards my niece's mum. He's been in and out of jail for 25 years. So contending with that is a difficult one for me. I have moments where I want him to get out of my life, and then there are moments when I miss him, and today I miss him. And I'm sad for it, because I love him so very deeply. And I know his pain, and I know the shit that he's been through. And I know that he's spent 18 months in solitary confinement in one stint. And I know that he's been in and out. And I know that he's scared, and I know that he's all these things. So I guess, safety for me is just one of those non-lineal things, I think. It doesn't make sense.
It absolutely makes sense. Speak a little bit about the sacredness, because you were talking about your family and about the strong women. So talk about that.
So always in my life, there is a history of violence and dysfunction in my family, and sexual violence as well. And so it's interesting that you say sacredness, because we just had a conversation about my cousin who sadly lost her life about 5 months ago to cancer. And for us as women, we get together every year for a weekend, the Wadigo Women's Weekend, and it's all about sacredness, and it's all about coming together and loving each other and supporting each other. And this particular woman in my family, Wendy, is part of this long lineage of women who have absolutely instilled in us this strength that I can't explain it. It's very innate. And when I walk into a room, or I'm at ABC, which is a massive white organisation, or I'm in a boardroom with 9 other men, so many white men, that power sits with me, and I can't quite explain it, but it's very innate. And I know that we as women stick together and have this connection that we hinge from this long line of strength. And we haven't beaten genocide and beaten bullshit policies and racism and discrimination, and not just beaten it, but like they're deadly women, right? Like they've risen above, and they've got this little thing in here that lives with them that's like this connection that I'm so very fortunate to have been able to find through all this violence and dysfunction that exists in the society that we live in. So I hope that speaks to your thing of sacredness.
It absolutely does. And I think about, and we'll talk a little bit more with our other members of our panel here, but I think about, like that strong women, and when you're talking about that, I think about my own family and how, we just gravitate to the women because they radiate that strength. And even the men acknowledge it. The men who are beating them acknowledge that. The men who are raping them acknowledge that strength, and they know that it is the women that are keeping the safety and all of that. So Rona, do you have some thoughts on specifically, the safety, the solidarity, the sacredness, and how does that influence and impact the work that you do?
I guess really for initially my thoughts were it's about healing, and it's about creating those safe spaces for our mob to come through the processes of healing, and each of the services that you guys represent here today in the sector, those are they're important integral points of healing for our mob to come through. So I'm really conscious that cultural safety, it can be it's really understated just how important it is to have that implemented and embedded in not only the service but also each and every person that works there, because when our mob walk in, we can tell in a heartbeat if it's not a culturally safe environment, and we will either just walk out or we'll just clam up, and that's not what we want in the healing process. It needs, they need to feel safe to be able to express themselves and identify and things like that. So I guess with the work that I do with Work Up, I'm really conscious of where we've come through, like Karina, sorry, mine's blank, spoke about the strong women, and you come through, and my great-grandmother, she was a survivor of genocide. As a little one, she was taken to a station, and all through her life she's had things that, she's beaten the odds, but she never ever sort of spoke of hate, and always just at us kids about working hard, and she to talk about how old she was, when she was working on the station, she was nursing the station owner's baby when they got word that that the Queen mother was born. So, so she was really quite old, and so that's a long time of being able to, survive without her parents, her family. She was adopted into the tribe that she actually lived with. And and I grew up in a time when, the books referred to us as savages. So you'd sit there in social studies and you'd feel this deep shame because of, you know, the language that they used in those coloniser books. So I'm really conscious now of the way that, you know, our mob can feel when we are looking for help, and, you know, especially our mob who are in crisis. So I guess it sort of comes then to where, you know, that sacredness thought, like all those things that are innate in us, and it's that connection to our country, you know, connection to our mob, our languages which are coming back. All of those things, they need to be preserved and kept sacred in that safe space. That's why when we very, you know, when you're asking, do you identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, it's not just, you know, to tick a box or to, you know, for auditors or things. It's a really important question for our mob, because then we understand that you're valuing our culture and you're going to be able to help us access the assistance that we need, and you know, and also help us maybe connect to the right services in our area. Sorry, I've lost a point here somewhere. Yeah, and I guess the other point was about, you know, the work that we do is really important to just eliminate that racism that can be there either covertly, overtly or covertly, you know. So overt, we can sort of sometimes, you know, we know how to deal with that, but sometimes it's that covert stuff that sort of can unravel us really quickly, and sometimes it mightn't happen at the time, but then later on we'll be thinking, hey, wait a minute, what they mean by that, you know. So I think it's really important that, you know, we sort of unravel, you know, unpack that a little bit, get, you know, and do our little bit to just be, help. That helps our mob sort of settle into the space as well. Sorry, I'm super nervous today.
No. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Lynn. Go ahead.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Okay, safety, solidarity, and sacredness. When I think about safety, it's about all facets of safety, obviously, and in particular what Rona had mentioned, cultural safety. If we don't have that cultural, spiritual safety, we cannot engage in any context. Obviously, you know, there's legislation, you know, that protects you around your physical safety and also your mental safety, but there is nothing to protect us when we are thrust into situations where we feel really culturally unsafe. Growing up, you know, I was the only Murray kid in my class for about 10 years until grade 11 and 12. I went to a school where there was a boarding part of it, and so there were, you know, Murray girls coming in from Mooravinda. That was the first time when I was like 16 when I actually felt safe, because there were people from their mission that my mom come from were there, and I felt safe because we all looked at the world with the same eyes. We understood what was important around values and protocol, and you know, our particular way of interacting and engaging. Prior to that, I had to pretty much fit into the mainstream. But, you know, so you'd go to school, put your white collar clothes on, and go and engage in that regard. Go home, take it off, and start running around the neighbourhood like little black collars, you know, that we were. There's a big lot of us too, actually. And if you can imagine how that would make someone feel growing up, having to sort of navigate between these multiple worlds, speaking, you know, a certain way at home with our Aboriginal English, you know, and then having to put that lolly in your gob when you got to school. This is a Catholic private school, you know, for girls as well, just for girls. The boys were on the other side of the campus, and there was an invisible line, you couldn't cross it. and none of them so new, but mine was. But anyhow, so safety, I guess for me, so paramount is, cultural safety. Feeling that I belong, feeling that I have something to contribute, feeling that I can add value, not just because of, the level of knowledge I have, but because of my cultural knowledge, because of, the knowledge that comes from my mom, from my community, from my old people. That has as much or more validity than all the other noise that is around me. So, in relation to domestic and family violence, as I said earlier, we have very much changed that narrative because we attribute all of the adversities that we are confronted with to the colonisation process. If you can imagine having a country and people just come and live there, and because they don't like you living there, because you were there first, and in my area, there were massacres right across central Queensland. You may have heard of some of the more prominent ones, the Coloringa massacre. In the town where I live, there was a huge massacre on the other side of the river. So you can imagine how we feel when we get out on the streets and march for our rights. Because, as it's been said throughout this forum, our sovereignty was never ceded. We've never engaged in any treaty. There are 3 ways in which to take over a country: purchase, conquer, exploration, discovery and exploration. None of those happened here in Australia. And over 600 nations were completely ignored, silenced, and made invisible, and our people were taken and put onto and incarcerated in reserves. So that was 247 years ago. We were still living quite peacefully in our ways for over 60,000 years. So in the 247 years, we have been decimated, massacred, dispossessed. So you pile all of that grief and loss onto our people today. We've got a lot of work to do. So that's why, when we talk about safety, it's about this cultural safety. Sacredness, obviously, for us, it's connection. We can see slowly, these younger people are becoming disconnected to our old ways. So what is sacred is staying connected as a mob, which is probably why most of the mob might move away. Like I've only just met Karina today, but already I acknowledge Karina as king, as someone, whose people have experienced what my mob have. They would have spoken a different language to my mob, the Hogan mob, but that affinity and that connection is so important, and that speaks to, I guess, our solidarity as well. I could go to a conference, a meeting on the other side of Australia. People will acknowledge me as auntie or sister, and straight away that connection is formed. I was at a conference or a forum in Canberra one time, and this Noor fellow right down the end of the table, he was talking, and then he referred to me, to my sister up there, referred to me. And during the morning tea break, is that your brother? Wow, you have him now. That's just the way it rolls. So sacredness is about maintaining our connection to each other and then to our ancestors and to our ancestral spirits and our homelands. That is what is sacred. And that's where the hard work is, isn't it? Is trying to keep our young people connected in this modern day, hip hop and, all the islands from America. Sorry, nothing against America. And Tupac and, I'm not to show my age, but you know what I mean. And we're up against obviously social media, internet, you know, that sort of thing. And solidarity, I think it's all intertwined. You know, solidarity is for us to always be working together, being on the same page, challenging each other. But at the same time, you know, always holding on to what is most valuable to us. And that is our culture, our country, and our people.
And so you were talking a little bit about how that solidarity and then the sacredness, and it reminded me of, so through colonization, it was my father who was taken away from his parents and sent to boarding schools, and when he returned home, he couldn't even speak my grandparents' language that had been, you know, beaten out of him, raped out of him, cut out of him. And so he had no connection to his land, to his family, to his people, and did not want to return. And, so with my mother being white, it was very interesting to go into the schools. And at the time when our legislation was trying to reintegrate traditional Native American values and Native American culture, and so I was the white-looking kid going to the Native American classes with the Native American students, and I don't fit in. I don't know the language. I don't know the history. I don't, you know, this isn't even my land that we're on. And it wasn't until I had returned back to my tribe where, you know, these people know how to pronounce my name. And that had never happened before. I had never had, and so it was kind of like that disconnect and yet connection at the same time. And so, you know, the first time that I went back to my own powwow, and I'll never forget, you know, the first time that I heard my first big drum ceremony, and it was like something in my soul, like the DNA knew that that it was home, and that was sacred. And so what I'm seeing with my tribe, and then in the state of Minnesota, we are, it's been kind of coined as almost a Native American renaissance, where our young people are really working hard to relearn you know, we're a verbal history. And so to relearn the language, relearn the stories, relearn the songs, and we're seeing that, even though we have the hip hop and, you know, all of that culture as well. And so it's that sacredness, but with that modern twist. They're making it their own. So I want to talk a little bit about the work that you're doing. And so I want to know, could you give an example of your work where you have navigated challenges and leveraged opportunities? And I want to think about it in this lens where knowing what you know, and the history and the people that you have to work with, how have you been able to leverage that, and to, you know, to what result, to what end have you been able to come up with?
I think for me, I've always had this drive and want to work with Black women. It's always been something that's there, but it's also been something that's not been a job for me. It's just come really naturally because of how I was raised. And because of what I saw as a child and what I experienced. And growing up, I suppose I was never on the trajectory to become a journalist or to make a documentary or to do any, or to even be sitting here, all right. It was always for our mob. We grew up in a low socioeconomic area. I won't say poor because we weren't. We had incredible mothers. Not all of us, but had that access to mothers in my street. But the challenges that I think have come and the opportunities that I've leveraged off, begin from when I can remember. Leaving Woodridge High, getting expelled from Woodridge High, and I spent a lot of my time sniffing paint as a young kid. I loved Tupac, by the way, Annie Lynn, just saying. I was a big poster of him. But, that's an interesting conversation with yourself and how we identified with American hip hop, because in Australia, I just didn't have a thing for Nikki Webster. I just, you know what I mean? Like, I related more to Tupac than I did to Nikki, because you don't see black people on the screen. You never saw black people on the screen back then. And I'll tell you right now, you don't see them now either. As I write my thesis on the representation of Aboriginal women in the media, and I sit in an office in the city as the only non-white Australian at ABC Radio Brisbane, the only non-white Australian, I can tell you that is still the case. And so those challenges, right, it challenges me right up until yesterday. Every single day, I see it as a challenge, because when I walk in there, it's not representing the voices of my community. And I say it, and I'm a bit of the problem one there, right? Like, they would love for me to piss off and replace me with a Susan or whatever. They would. But I continue to go. There's a reason for me being there, and it's because I know that we deserve to be in those spaces, but also that we had and we have such a unique and wonderful culture that exists, and there is a place for us in those spaces. So those types of challenges in those spaces have come up a lot. When I spent 4 years making a documentary about incarceration, the incarceration of Aboriginal people in Australia, which in itself was challenging. There was repeated footage of the brutalisation of Aboriginal people in this documentary that I looked at for 4 years, alongside whilst my brother, who I'm incredibly close with, is going in and out, while my children's father is going in and out, whilst my sister girls are going in for domestic violence with violent resistance, right? While I got arrested just 400 metres that way for resisting violence, right? And so the challenge of that has always been that I don't want to sit in my trauma, because my trauma is not what defines me. And so the opportunities that I've had, I think, have been those little glimpses of things or people that have come into my life who I've kind of gone, oh yeah, no, like, yeah, I can be better than that, or I am better than that, or that doesn't define me, or this is a product of a societal issue. This is, but I think the number one challenge, I'm harping on a bit, but I think the biggest challenge for me as an Aboriginal woman who has experienced rape and experienced violence, and it's always hard for me to say that out loud, especially that first word, because it took me about 10 years to understand, or to be able to articulate that. So when I say it with power, because I can acknowledge it. But the biggest challenge that I've ever had is coming to terms with the fact that I'm a really good person, right? That I have really strong women that I've drawn love and strength from, and I've been really, really fortunate to leverage off that. Not everyone has access to this, right? My nieces are incredibly lucky, those 5 girls. I'm so very proud of them girls. And they are so lucky because they have had me and my 2 sisters and my mother to raise them up. And they are doing well for that, but they are an anomaly. Is there another word for that? They are an exception, because about 82% of Aboriginal children that are put into child safety do not go with their siblings. They don't have that with their siblings. And now my oldest, I call her my daughter, my oldest daughter, who turned 25 today, her 4 daughters are are all together and they are safe, and she's a wonderful mother. And if not for what we provided them, they would not be there.
Yeah.
Right? And society, particularly Queensland, which is so incredibly backward when it comes to incarceration, 38% of our prison population, female prison population, are Aboriginal women. We are the most highly incarcerated people in the entire world. When we look at numbers, we are the highest. And while I did that documentary, it was 33%. When I finished that documentary, it was 38%. So just keeping that in mind, I hear that things are changing and things are getting better and improving in areas, but if we lose that critical eye around things like that, then we'll lose momentum. We need to always be, I always say that I'm only as strong as the most vulnerable and disadvantaged Aboriginal woman in my life, right? You know, and so if I'm not pulling her up, and I'm not recognizing that, and I'm just doing these ones, Happy International Women's Day, you know, like, then I am not doing my job. And it's my responsibility as an Aboriginal woman to keep that lineage going, you know? Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, you know, you were talking about the strength of the women and, you know, then the strength in you, but the strength comes from then bringing up, you know, looking behind when you've hit this level that maybe some of your sisters, cousins, aunties haven't been in, but making sure that you turn around and bring up the next.
Can I just say, my strength are my nieces, right? 11 months and 2 days ago, my uncle who passed away, you know, and I mentioned Wendy and my cousin Babalu, and I watched my young people in that room stand beside him, you know, as he passed away, and as Wendy passed away and Baba passed away, all in palliative care, and these young people stood there, even when my dad was dying, stood there with this far away from each other, and held each other, and loved each other, and, you know, that's the stuff that you leverage off, right? And they inspire me. Like, I love my mum and she's deadly, and she'll always be my inspiration, but I look at these young ones, like, you know, and they are just so deadly. And we need to see that, and we need to work from a place of not from a deficit, but rather from this strength-based, such a weighty word, but you know what I mean? Like a place of strength and hope and all that fluffy stuff, but then also being really cognizant of being able to be a little bit, putting a bit of strategy behind it and going, okay, well, who are the people that I've got to be really gammon to today to make sure that I can get my message across, you know? And I don't say that to be disingenuous or to manipulate anyone, but there are times when people in very strong political positions do not give a shit, right? And so masking or being able to articulate yourself in a certain way is necessary in those spaces.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and you know, we have this saying, and maybe you have this saying here, but you know, and as women too, you know, I hope one day that I can work as little as you know, a mediocre white man who's, you know, who's my supervisor, my boss, my, you know, this and that, and it comes with, you know, a little bit of sometimes that balance between knowing that I belong in this space, that I deserve this space, that I can take up this space, but then to think about, you know, oh, this imposter syndrome also, like, do I really belong in this space? Because it's all these white men who seem to have so much confidence and so much authority to, you know, to be the judges, to be the prosecutors, to be the attorneys, to go into law school and you know, but then knowing, no, I do belong here. I belong here. My sisters belong here. My cousins belong here. And so, Rona, I want you to talk a little bit about, you know, how might we all continue to play a part in elevating the voices of our colleagues, our partners, our survivors, our sisters.
I think that's a really big part of understanding our why, or my why, why we do this. And it's, like I said before, being anti-racist and watching out for those moments of overt racism, but also the covert, because, and just sort of, not othering our mob. So a lot of people, they want to, do cultural awareness, or they want to be, have these culturally safe spaces, but it's really just about acknowledging our mob and, making those connections with our mob. So, and it's giving them the voice, and like in the services that you do, work in, it's giving them dignity and choice of being able to access the help that they need, or the services that they want. And sometimes our mob don't want to go to Aboriginal controlled organisations. They prefer to go to mainstream, but they have that dignity of choice. And it's always good to have that connection in the community, so that they understand the nuances of protocols, and what different, the fact that you can see that map down there and you can see all the different countries of mob, and each one of those will have their own set of protocols, and understanding that we're all diverse in our ways of thinking and our upbringings, and so it's just sort of, I guess, giving Aboriginal people that opportunity to be able to have that self-determination of their of when they're in crisis, where they can go for help. But also, if you have that good connection with the local mob in the area, that's a really rich thing for you to do, because then if an Aboriginal person walks in through the doors, you've got a connection that, and it might be a perpetrator, and he might be in meltdown, and it's good to have access to, maybe a phone number of an uncle who you can, call, that they can call and sort of, be part of that man's healing process, or aunties, young people these days. Some mob, if they've moved away from their country, they don't have that connection to their own country or their own relatives, and they can be down here and feel very isolated. But if the services have those phone numbers of local mob, and they've got that, built up that relationship and rapport, then they've got someone who can help their clients and even help themselves, and just building up that rapport with each other. And it could be as simple as having a cup of tea, or taking auntie for lunch, or just something similar, something like that. And then we're not just making those phone calls at NAIDOC time, and it's just being able to, I don't know, you're probably not aware of NAIDOC here, but it's national, it's a National Aboriginal Celebration Day, and
Your phone blows up that week.
It does, yeah. Elders' phones, they're very, very busy that week, and so it's we often talk about not, that's not the time to just keep calling the elders. It's all year round.
Like today.
Yeah, exactly. So, I guess it is about that, and it's about making it personal. So it's not because of the job. It's not in your job description. It's it's about making it personal, because you might some of the workforce might leave their jobs and go to another job, and that doesn't mean that connection will just disintegrate. Well, it can, but like if they really value it, it will be about just keeping that connection alive and just keep nurturing it. There was another point, but anyway.
No, Lynn, go ahead. So again, go back to this idea of the leverage, the opportunities and the challenges that you've had to leverage, and how did you, where did you get that strength? How did you leverage that, and to what end? What do you think has come from that and the benefits?
So in 2002, we had quite a high number of our young people suicide. And to the point where community come together, our elders in particular, to talk about why is this happening? Where is all of this pain coming from? You know, within that group and across the community, we came back to that one, you know, recurring theme around the intergenerational violence and trauma, or the trauma, you know, from through colonisation and how it was manifesting. And so young people, you know, now our participation rates in schools is slightly climbing, but a lot of our young people, like I said, when I went to school, I had to leave my Murray-ness at home and step into, you know, a totally different frame of mind, and, you know, try and see the world through the same lens as the rest of the students. However, so, you know, the conversations went back to, kept circling back to this, to colonisation and where we're at and why we're here. You know, not using it as an excuse, but really, you know, pointing to that fact, to that reality. And so they formed a consortium and to look at, you know, healing across our community. And so government sitting over here and looking in and going, gee, that's something different, something new, we want to jump into that space. And they did. And then they offered up the bucks and said, look, we can fund what you want to do. And so they went back to their number crunchers in those little dark rooms in government buildings, and they said, well, how can we, instead of just going, look, we're going to fund this, we're going to give you money, do what you want to do with it, you know, to try and achieve what you've set out to do. However, they went back and they said, well, we can't fund healing. What is healing? So they said, look, we can give you this money, but we're going to put you in the domestic family violence program area. Okay, so like, okay. Because domestic family violence was not necessarily coined as a term in our mob. When shit went down, our mob dealt with it. I've seen when, as a child, when we moved to the Yumba, I don't know if you Yumbas are the fringe towns, the camps that's outside of major towns. And usually what happened back in the day, any families that were transiting around, they could always go to the Yumba and someone would give them a bed and some food and then help them to get accommodation in the main town and things like that. And I can remember a fella getting into his missus, and it was really scary. Everyone jumped up, men and women. The women rushed to the woman and dragged her away. The fella was losing his shit, so one of the other men turned up an old, you know, 40-gallon drum, you know, the old drum that they used to cart fuel in it, and just put it straight over his head. Calmed him down, and then the men went. We didn't see the men for 2 days. And when they brought him back, when they came back, everyone all the adults sat around and yarned, and, you know, what went wrong, what could be done better, you know, the sacredness of women, you know, we bear life, you know, we held in this high sacred regard. So it was unusual for us, and unusual for the elders, because the elders were the ones that started this movement. And then all of a sudden we were working within government contracts. So when I came on board in 2005, I was headhunted to come on because the program was about to be defunded. And so, leveraging my knowledge, my connection with not only my community there in Rockhampton, but when my old people come out of Warrabinda, because my grandmother had her head shaved and was sent away from her family at Scherer to Warrabinda, because she refused to gnaw the testicles off of a dead sheep. But anyway, that's another story. Anyway, so the first thing I said, look, I won't come in here and do more of the same. You know, I won't be this deadbeat, you know, trying to fill contractual obligations. We need to do things differently. So I went out and spoke to my whole people. I got growled, like right across central Queensland, because of, you know, the organisation, you know, what it was not doing, what it was not, you know, delivering on the intent of the old people. Yeah, so I remember having a Rona, oh God, yes. I hold out of that community. Just from the growling on the old people, you know. Anyway, so the key thing, you know, was for me was, you know, my mother in my ear. You've got to get out there and you've got to go and talk to these old people. You've got to talk to young people. You've got to sit down and have the yarns. You've got to have the hard yarns. And so that's what happened. And we came back and we documented it all, thankfully. And we went back to government and said, you know, you either fund us to do this work or not at all. And, you know, basically so they were like, you know, because, you know, I don't know if you have much dealings with the upper echelons in our state government, but, you know, they don't want any egg on their face whatsoever. So anything to save face. So they funded us. So our contract is one broad deliverable. You could drive 1,000 trucks through it if you wanted to. And they did that because they knew that when we were supposed to do things their way, we weren't getting any results. When I started in that organisation, there were 10 clients and barely engaged at all, and they were all men. And they were all mandated from community corrections. They were on probation or parole or something like that. Now, you know, for the very first time, we're like, we may have to have a waiting list. We never ever want to turn anyone away, you know, because we know the pain that, you know, our mob are experiencing and we need to be there for them. But a waiting list won't mean check-ins and, you know, yarning circles or healing circles. But since then, when we were able to stand up to this big white system and say, you know, we want to do it our way, or you can take it and shove it. And they came to the party, and we've been doing that since then, doing things our way. And we found that that's our strength. You know, we get some mandated clients, but most of our clients are self-referred. They don't necessarily come as an individual, they come as a couple, or they come as a family. We've been able to now extend our services to include supporting our mobs with addiction, mental health, AODs. So I guess in terms of leveraging, we leveraged our own power, our own strength, our own knowledge, our way. And we were brave enough to say, you know, you can take your money and do whatever you want with it, because we can still do things in our way. So, you know, I know we're a bit of a shining example, you know, right across that health and human services sector. You know, I'm on, you know, some of I'm on the DV prevention, the Premier DV Prevention Council. First I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Because the way that they viewed and responded to violence and trauma was very different to how we do it. Yes, we have been in spaces where people say, oh, you can't do that, you can't support men, blah, blah, blah. They're our men, if they come to us and they need help, because they want to be that man, that partner in that relationship, well, we're going to help that family, you know. So we have a very different way of working, and I think that has been, you know, really standing firm on our convictions has been the leverage for us to really, I suppose, achieve in, you know, supporting our mob to empower themselves along their own healing journeys.
We are at our break time, but I want to just hold this space a little bit longer for a couple of final thoughts. Based upon the conversations that you've heard today, any final thoughts as to what you've heard, or things that you want to make sure that?
I just have one thing,
Yeah.
and it's really simplistic. Okay, so in a former life, I worked in the higher education sector. I have a bachelor's degree in business accounting. Can you imagine me being an accountant? But one thing I do vaguely remember was that when I did economics and political studies, that policy started from the ground up, right? Started from the people, up through the channels, and the people at the helm, they took on board and they developed policy that was for the people, right? But you know that doesn't happen, eh? That is a number cruncher in a dark room that says, this is how this sector should be funded. And they give us these contracts, well not us anymore, but I know our partners in the sector, they give these ridiculous deliverables. Most of it around outputs, none of it around outcomes. And that really bugs me, because I'm thinking, did I sit in that politics class for nothing? Wasted all that time staring at the ceiling, So I just think that as a sector, we all know what's working and what's not working. And, I'd love to be able to see, our sector mobilise, and start, feeding up, what we believe works and what doesn't work.
And I guess with me, like one of the biggest challenges that I have has always been about police. And when I saw on that thing yesterday, the slideshow, and it talked about the reforms, and it had one of the things was building cultural capability in the police force. Like, that's not enough to do the kind of work that needs to be done with the police. So I was really, this week's been a struggle, because we've seen as a response to a young man who was, seeking help, 18 police fully armed turn up and with murder on their mind, and that's what's happened. And that's not a response that should have been there for that man, that young Aboriginal man. So what I like is that, leveraging off the work that we do with Work Up, we get to be in the ears of people that are high up in government, and it's good to be able to, sort of feed into the responses that with the work that we do. And it's been inspiring to sort of see that hierarchy map yesterday. And that's sort of something I think a lot of work needs to be done with the police. And it's been inspiring for me to keep police high on the stakeholder list of all the projects that we do, because that's the way that we're going to sort of, hopefully dismantle some of that systemic institutionalisation that each police force member seems to carry, as they go about their daily lives. And, they often have a lot to do with the way our mob are treated at first response, to domestic violence, or, our women can be arrested for something completely unrelated, like unpaid parking fines or some ridiculous thing like that, So I think that was really wonderful to hear Melissa talk yesterday about how, instead of being pissed off, just, stop and work with those, with the people that, that we do have that issue with like me.
I love that, sis. That's a big thing for me too, is my issue with the police. You spoke about safety before, and I only 3 weeks ago had to go up to the police station because they thought that it was okay to come to my house and kick the door in downstairs. That is my safe home, and you will not come to my home and do that. And I looked at him and I said, you will not do that. That is disgusting behaviour. Every single person in this room has an opportunity to have an impact on that in some capacity. always believe the woman and understand where you stand when it comes to your relationship with police. You know, the amount of times I've heard not all police is just like insane. It's kind of like that not all men thing, right? And you know, I don't care to hear that, right? You guys have this, and there are people in this room who I have worked with and didn't even realise. And by the way, I googled your name. I looked in my email, Anita, and I found all these emails from this woman up the back from 2018 when I made a decision to leave initially. And just the level of humanity that she showed. She didn't have to do those extra little things that she did for me. You know, it's those things I think that you people, at the time I'd been arrested because I was trying to get my children out of the house from that they were locked in with my kid's father, and he had hit me and I smashed the windows and done all these things, right? And I felt such utter shame, and I felt like, what the fuck am I gonna do? He has a tendency to strangle me. And so it was from that moment that I never called the police again. And I will never call the police again. I'm very fortunate in saying that I have connections with really strong, deadly women, and I can call on them. You know, my best friend works for another lady here we were just talking about yesterday, you know, and I'm really lucky in that regard. But I think just challenging your lens and how you see it, and always believing the woman, and always understanding the position that police play in I've watched them pull my nieces away. I've watched them arrest me. I've watched them smash my brother's head from here to here. I've watched them play handball with my best friend's partner after he split her spleen and Beard Street Woodridge. I have been picked up from the gutter with a baby in my hands and told to shut the fuck up and stop crying, what's your problem, when my sister-in-law almost had a miscarriage from being bashed in the house. And I have 2 babies, Michaela, for birth me now, and Tiara in my arms. So understanding that this is a real thing, like I'm not Gavin making this up, I don't just walk around making this shit up, like it happens, right? And I think we all have a responsibility to be cognizant of that. But then I think the other thing is the humanity piece. Like, you're not machines, you guys are doing some deadly work. I'm going to try not to swear, sorry. You're doing some really deadly work, right? And you are human beings, you can feel. And there are rules, right? And I'm not saying don't adhere to them at all, but I mentioned yesterday that there was one lady who followed me through my journey from YFS, and I know how much YFS get funded, and it's not very much. But she went to the ends of the earth to help me, and, you know, maybe went the extra mile for me, and knew that I was back in a relationship with the dad, and knew that I was doing all the things that you're not supposed to do as far as when you're in a, I don't know, you're just supposed to leave them and block them out like they don't exist or whatever. But she had this thing called humanity where she understood and she felt. And so I think you guys do this every day, and I think exercising that, you know, within the realms of, you know, I'm not encouraging people to go against policies or whatever, or, you know,
Bend them.
But you can be really creative in these things. And I think, and the advocacy piece, don't be scared to be up the front and to go, I can see that this is not working here because we are really intertwined with the police, or, you know, we're really this or really, and I'm gonna actually say something and have a conversation, a really open one, you know, that can lead to change. So if I can leave you with that, and just thank you for the work as well. You know, I think it's important to have gratitude for this stuff, you know, to the people who personally helped me or helped my family members and continue to, and for what you will do in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Thank you, Lynn, Rona, Karina. And thank you all for listening and, you know, being so attentive in these conversations, these important conversations. And I feel like I just want to, we just started. We could sit here all day and continue. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Laurie. Laurie, can I just give you a little gift just from us to take back to America with you? Thank you
so
for
much.
facilitating this
Yes.
panel. It's been wonderful to sort of meet you and make that connection with the Ojibwa Nation in America. And yeah, thank you for your contribution to this panel here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you, everyone.